the door. He's trying to break it down.
Oh, yep.
And that, my friends, is how we found ourselves at the side of this quadruple murder scene. Coming to you as ghosts from the life beyond.
No, I'm sure Tater Tot's gonna end up watching some Paw Patrol.
Tater Tot's the one who's gonna kill us all.
Yeah. Got that.
What happened? Mommy! Sat soup.
Oh.
Oh no. I feel that in my soul. I think it was worse that we
took a break.
Yeah. Well, that's all right. I doubt we can hear him.
I know. Every time we say, "Oh, do you hear the Tater Tot?" Nobody ever hears the Tater Tot.
Yeah, sometimes you can and sometimes you can't. And sometimes I just leave it in just to prove that we're not imagining things. Like he's not a figment of our imagination. He's real. I forgot to check the ghoul door. It is still open.
Like a crack. I did shut it.
That doesn't make it better.
I did shut it, but it doesn't so I will say
Slenderman's foot is in the jam.
Oh my god, I was gonna say that it was taped shut. Because it Yeah. Well, listen. So originally, where my ghoul door is, there's that water meter. And it was shut with masking tape. And then when they put a new water meter in, they cut the masking tape. But I think the doors just don't shut well because
there's a ghoul in there.
Well, and because when we bought the house, there was just every person that's ever bought a house can attest to this. There were things that were done to the house that you're like, what? Why? There were outlets that looked like there was Ethernet ports in all the room, and cable lines ran in all the. They were fake. They were fake Ethernet and cable boxes installed to look like they had access to each one, but there was not actual cable. So when we had cable lines ran through, the installers we're yeah, we got them in each of these, and they unscrewed it, and they're like, this, it's just a wall. And I went, what? What the hell? And I was like, how are you about to, just don't put anything. I would rather you put nothing than to fake people out.
They flim-flammed you.
Yeah, I was, oh man, so much of our house is the same story of yeah, we have access to that, and then
yeah, it's totally not haunted by Slender Man who inhabits the ghoul door in the basement. There's definitely not a man who lives in the crawl space that you don't know about.
So yeah, what I'm just trying to tell you is we were a little peeved about it, but that's the origin of the ghoul door.
I have had to run on my treadmill to keep my run streak going because it's 11:30 at night when I finally have time to run, or it's 6 in the morning and negative 14 degrees outside. And I don't really like running on the treadmill, so I get bored really easily. And I started looking around, and my basement has drop ceilings.
Mm-hmm.
So it has the little things you can push up and move over,
mm-hmm.
which my cat, Obi, found them immediately when I brought him home, within the first, I think it was the first day that I went to work and left him home by himself.
No.
And my mom was there, and I came home and she was just standing there glaring at me because she was so pissed about the experience she had all day with him, because she's not a cat owner, so she doesn't know cat behavior or anything like that. And he got in the ceiling and she couldn't find him, and she was calling him, and she looked up and saw him looking down through the grate over the lights, and then didn't know how to get him out of the ceiling and was freaking out.
That's
and
really funny,
couldn't do anything because one, she's disabled, she can only use one arm. She's also 5'2", so she's not tall enough to reach them, and she also doesn't know how to get a cat to do anything. And I'm at work, so she's freaking out. But there's 2 of the panels are pushed up, somebody tried to move them.
Oh,
but nobody's been down there to do anything, so I don't know how they're pushed up.
That's weird.
And if it was Obi, more than likely he would have gotten in and like and they'd be pushed down.
Right. Huh. I don't know.
I don't know either. I just try not to think about it. But then I keep thinking I'm going to turn around like when I'm done running and it's going to be like a ghoul.
A ghoul.
We used to have a terrifying troll mask on our wall behind our bar in the basement.
Wait.
My uncle got it when he was stationed in like Germany.
When you say troll mask, are you talking like trolleys, like the ones I collect trolls, or like
not the trolls with the hair, like the cute hair, like a legitimate like Norwegian Scandinavian style troll
so scary.
with the gross bulbous nose, and it had black eyes that were like reflective, and it had a switch on the back that you would turn it on and it was motion activated, and the eyes would light up red and it would like yell things at you in another language.
That's terrifying.
And it had like crazy hair, and it was like hung on the wall behind our bar, and so that was like why I was scared. One of the many reasons I was scared to go down in the basement as a kid was because that was there. So.
Fair.
And it was next to like a pub sign that was hanging on the wall that said like the Lord giveth and the government taketh away. Like, or something like that. Like very the only thing sure is death and taxes. Like, so yeah, who knows? It probably is haunted. I don't want to think about it.
So
speaking of that very like Irish outlook on things, we're coming back and we're gonna be including F. Lee Bailey.
Yeah.
A little Baileys, if you will.
Yep. Talking about Bailey. We're going to talk about some courtroom drama. We're going to talk about wrestling. We're going to talk about death. We're going to talk about some moida. You know, it's just another Sunday at the Lake Erie Library. Woo! One of these days in the future, I'm not saying like anytime soon, but in the far future, we'll be doing this on a different day of the week, and then we'll listen back with fondness and go, Sundays. Remember Sundays in Beth's basement? Fun times.
I'll be like, Sunday? What's a Sunday? I haven't known what day it is for 5 years. What year is it?
Oh. My tater tot won't be a tater tot anymore at that point.
A teetle toddle.
Yeah.
Oh, the teeter toddle in the kindergarten.
So yeah, welcome back to the Lake Erie Library and part 2 of the Sam Sheppard trial and the murder of Marilyn Sheppard, aka the crime of the century.
Man, I just keep thinking of the interviews I watched with Sam's brother Steven, and like these like very sound bitey like comments he kept making, because you're using the crime of the century, and I just keep thinking at one point he was just like, my anger knows no bounds. And I was like, wow, okay.
Yeah, we talked about last week's episode about how if this was done today, like just how different this would. Well, first of all, we have DNA, so I feel like this would have been a way different type of investigation. But like the social media and stuff like that, like that's, while some things have changed, other things have remained very much the same. And we do have a very, with the rise of social media, a trial by peers automatically, with things like breaking. Like I'm just thinking right now of like, I have Twitter on my phone. I still haven't updated it, so it still says Twitter, and they're like, this is out of date. I'm like, I know, and it does not run the way it should, because, you know, Elon Musk fired everybody, so it's gonna run like crap anyways. But it just keeps, like, I can't search for anything, so it just feeds me things that I think I'll like. So I'm like, oh, I'm gonna read about like beef between Meg the Stallion and Nicki Minaj.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm just like, because I've read one thing, now everything is like half the tweets I see are about that.
Yeah.
And it's just very interesting to me to read these things because, like, the stuff that people are getting upset about and, like, trying to prove one way or another is very, like, black and white cut. And, like, if you're not with me, you're against me.
Well, that's just the internet.
Right. But it's just very funny to, like, read these, like, what they're using as evidence for things. And, like, the people that, like, don't like Meg Thee Stallion, they're like, well, this, and this proof. And she doesn't know how to dance. And then you have, like, the Meg supporters who are like, let me show you all this evidence of her dancing to choreography, both live and in videos. And I'm like, but then it's like, it doesn't matter because these people who don't like her are like, yeah, well, she's stupid and has a big foot and Nicki Minaj is the best. And I'm like, but I don't.
That sign's not going to stop me. I don't know how to read.
Yeah, it feels very, and I was like, I mean, that's been a problem on social media for years, is that people have their opinions and they just want to say their opinions and then they don't want to have, like, a real discussion like a human being. They're just like, so I'm just imagining, like, what kind of, like, this would look like, because they would use his, like, sound bites and say, like, he'd be like, I went to Marilyn.
As I ascended the staircase, I visualized the door was open. And I recall correctly that the door had always been secured tightly each evening as we took the progress road to sleep.
and you know that some Yahoo would be like, I am a true crime girly, and he is clearly, like, devoid of emotion. He's obviously neurospicy, and he obviously did it, like, with no remorse. Like, you know that would happen, and then there would be, like, some sort of, like, not a dialogue about it, and your brain will just feel like it's rotting as you're reading everything. And then somehow,
like, Susan would end up, like, the total villain in this, because that's also what we do. It would be like, well, if she hadn't been such a hussy, calling him Dr. Sam and seducing him, and she knew that he was married and Marilyn was pregnant and she still slept with him anyway. They're scumbags together. They probably plotted it together. She probably made him do it.
Yeah.
And Susan would be like, I literally don't even live in the same state anymore. How is this my fault?
Right. And then they would both be blacklisted forever.
Canceled.
And
then he'd probably get elected president.
But
anyway.
Welcome to the Lake Erie Library. Working on part 2. We left you at part 1 where the jury did convict Sam Sheppard of the murder in the 2nd degree of his wife, Marilyn. I don't remember. I always look up what the degrees mean, and I can't remember right now.
I think...
Is 1st degree crime of passion, 2nd degree's motivated, I think?
I think it has to do with premeditation, too.
Yeah.
Let's check right now.
Yeah, I look these up occasionally, because, you know, I run a writers group, so I'm just like, I feel like it's something I need to know.
So, 1st degree murder is with malice aforethought. So, it is like premeditated intention.
Okay, so this is like
1st degree murder has to be committed with some sort of intent to kill the person.
Okie dokie.
Malice aforethought it basically just means that, like, you did so knowing that, like, you didn't give a shit if you took a human life. 2nd degree is intentional killing without premeditation, so that's like crime of passion.
Oh, interesting. So that's what he
intent to cause only serious bodily harm, extreme indifference to human life, and like felony murder. So it's 1st degree is like, I sat there and I thought about it and I planned it and I killed her. 2nd degree is like, well, I lost my cool and I hit her and I killed her.
Mm-hmm.
And then 3rd is I guess, like, manslaughter more adjacent.
Right. I know they said third degree is like it's real, but it's not.
There's
it's not
only
the
3
same.
states
Yeah.
that have it. It's like Florida, Pennsylvania. I don't know where the other one is. Yeah, it is like essentially like a manslaughter where it's like, well, I didn't intend to kill anyone, but it was an accident.
Like vehicular.
Like as a result of my actions, somebody died.
Gotcha. Interesting. So, for that
lawyer.
For that recap, again, he was not convicted for first-degree murder, but he was convicted for second-degree murder for the wife of his wife Marilyn.
Wife of his murder.
For the wife of his murder. Why no alive?
Why did they get dead? When?
When dead? God.
English, first language ours.
I'm never gonna live that down.
That's what my brain does sometimes, is talks like that, so, like, I get it. It's especially also now, because I'm, like, you know, a language student with a language with a totally different grammar and syntax, and, like, there's no articles, and there's, like, nothing. It's just the words, and so it's very, like, dead how become? Tell you now. Jail go Sam. Stay forever? No. Happen what?
So he got convicted.
Picture this. It's 1966.
Yeah, he missed 10 years. He missed the, civil rights.
His son is now, like, an adult.
His son's an adult.
He went from 8 to 18.
Yeah, he's got a couple of girlies that are interested in him while he's sitting in jail because he's still good looking. Does it say where he was in jail at?
It was near Columbus, and I remember in the thing I watched, it was like True. The show was called True CSI, and it was an episode that was fully about this case, and they had a lot of interviews with Sam Jr. And he described what it was like going to visit his dad there, and he was like, there were people, like, patrolling the hallway outside, like, where I, like, just to make sure that, like, we weren't doing anything, and they would, like, beat you if you did anything untoward. He's like, it was dark. I used to call it the dungeon because that's what it felt like. Like, it was this very dimly lit, like, super depressing cell with these very aggressive, like, guards essentially watching and listening to everything.
Because he was so he was sentenced to prison, and he was in a maximum security prison. So, like, no privileges, no nothing. Like, he was not afforded any grace whatsoever, other than he was gonna get, like, up for parole in 10 years. Yeah.
And shortly after he went there, literally within the month after he went to prison, Sam's mother completed suicide. She shot herself. His father died of cancer, but Stephen, one of their other sons, in the interview that I was watching, like, said, like, all of his father's, like, cancer and his illness was exacerbated by, like, the stress of the trial, and like, he had, like, ulcers and things like that,
which are usually caused by stress.
Yeah, so they lost both their parents. I don't know when it happened, but I know Marilyn's father also completed suicide.
And he was allowed to attend his parents' funeral, but in handcuffs. So he's not even given, like, kind of the dignity or furlough of, like, a funeral. Like, he is treated as if he is, like, a convict there as well.
Yeah. He's in this maximum security prison for, like, the next 7 years.
He also took part in 1959 voluntarily in cancer studies by the Sloan Kettering Institute for Cancer Research, allowing live cancer cells to be injected into his body. Which, I guess, if you're in jail, you're like,
I get it.
why not?
That's also something that his son said that he explicitly told his son, like, I love you and you are the only reason I'm still alive. Like, I am alive so that you can live, because if I didn't have you, I would have hung myself in the cell years ago.
That's so sad.
Like, he lost his wife, he lost his unborn child, he lost both of his parents, he lost his father-in-law. Like, he really did not have anything to live for except for his son. So, very sad. And that was when Stephen was like, am I angry? My anger knows no bounds.
Right. So after the trial was completed, the authorities handed over kind of the keys to the Sheppard's house. They had held on to them, so his attorneys weren't able to actually get into the house to get any additional evidence until after the trial was completed, which is so sus. So sus.
Yeah.
And then the defense hired Dr. Paul Leland Kirk, who is the oh my God, Beth. The criminologist.
Criminalist.
I don't know.
I had tinnitus in my ankle. And tendinitis in my ear. How they get dead? Why? My
brain knows what I'm talking about, but my mouth is not moving at the same pace as my brain is.
It's fine.
It's not great for podcasting. People are like, Beth is like, she says some real weird things on the line. Like, she is not very smart sometimes. And I'm like, but I am. I think.
Beth, we love you dearly. All of the listeners and I are gathered here today. We've all written you letters because we feel that you have a problem. You're drinking too much.
Oh, God.
Coffee.
Well, yes, that is probably true. I've gotten to the point now where I'm
Surprise intervention!
I've gotten to the point with my coffee consumption where I'm like, I have to slow down the pace, because if I drink it all in one setting, my hands get a little shaky, and I'm like, hey, Beth, your caffeine, you literally went from drinking a cup a day for a long time while you were pregnant and breastfeeding to upping your consumption. So, and now you drink like 4 to 6 cups. So you maybe slow down a little bit. You can cut it back a little bit. Beth.
That's how I feel after I drink a Celsius. But like, I don't know. For some reason, that caffeine hits me so different than coffee. Like, I feel like I finish a Celsius and I need to like crush the can on my head like a frat boy. And then I need to go like pick up something heavy.
I had somebody the other day talking about putting coffee and Red Bull, or vice versa. It was combining the two, and I went, no.
Disgusting.
I said, no, sweet child, no.
That taste would be so disgusting.
I said, yeah, first of all, that's gross. I said, also, too much caffeine at once. Like, don't do it.
I don't know. I used to drink Red Eyes regularly, which is like 4 or 5 shots of espresso in an iced coffee. So...
Oh, but I was just like, don't. Bleh, bleh.
I think the taste is more disgusting because Red Bull tastes like pixie sticks and water, and I can't justify that taste with coffee.
No, that would be icky. Anyways, back to,
you know who didn't have Red Bull or Celsius or coffee?
Sam Sheppard.
Sam Sheppard.
He had nothing.
Dr. Paul Kirk, the criminologist, may have drank some coffee though, or criminalist. Now you have me doing it.
So he was nationally known, and he actually did study the blood splatter.
He's kind of like the forefather of blood spatter analysis.
And he determined that the person who caused all the blood splatter had to have been left-handed. Which was important because Sam Sheppard was right-handed.
Mm-hmm. He's also the one who went and did the DNA testing on their blood types, and he found a big stain on the wall that didn't match anything else. Like the way blood spatter works is he's like, if it was casting off from like the body, the blood spatter, the droplets would get smaller the further away they got, but the blood splatter was all, they were like the same size. So he's like, so this is coming off of like the murder weapon.
Ooh.
And then there was a big like splotch on the wall that didn't look like anything else, and he's like, this looks like it probably was like somebody who was bleeding with a wound brushing against it. And Sam didn't have any open wounds. And then he also found droplets going down the stairs throughout the house, and
which, if Marilyn was fighting back, which they did find evidence of a struggle with her wounds, and she wounded the assailant, that would line up with...
concluded that she probably bit him, and that's how her teeth were damaged. And so she bit the assailant. He's dripping blood throughout the house. He leaves a huge mark on the wall where he hit it. He also probably got some blood on Sam as they fought. And then, like, all of the blood types that were there, like, these extra droplets did not match either Marilyn or Sam's blood. So there was a third person's blood in the house. Yes.
The defense then petitioned for a new trial based on this newly discovered evidence, but the trial court denied the motion on May 9th, 1955.
He also, when he was making his conclusions, like, remember they said, it's a surgical tool. And he was like, no, more likely, like, based on the shape, it was probably a flashlight.
What a wildly different thing than a surgical tool.
And he thought, like, well, this is more than likely, like, someone who, like, knew them and did not like them.
And they also, I think, in further talking to Sam, found out that they leave their doors unlocked because, one, they live in a bougie neighborhood in Bay Village in the 50s, and crime was not really a thing back then. I'm not saying that they didn't have crime, but they did not have huge elements of crime. So he's like, we were both home. I wouldn't lock my doors at night, which there are some people that live like that today. I'm not saying everybody does, but
couldn't be me.
Did you see like there's like a weird TikTok sensation now of all these like white women who live like Home Alone lengths of like
when their husbands go to work? Yeah.
I'm like, what are you doing?
Wild.
Like, are you that afraid of getting murdered? Well, I guess you are, but like, that's wild to me.
Yeah.
Like, you don't think... I don't know. It's just like, I lock the door, I turn off the... And I'm like, okay,
I get it. I mean, and, you know, statistically, women are more often victims of violent crimes like that, so I get it. But also, like, what kind of life are you living that you think you're putting yourself in a position where you are going to be a victim of a violent crime? Because, like, if you are just chilling at home all the time, like, and you have not had any, like, break-ins in your neighborhood, and you're not, like, flashing that you know, have a shit ton of money and expensive stuff in your house that someone would want to come steal, like, why would you think they would pick you?
I also think it's weird, like, you are showing hundreds of thousands of people on TikTok the inside of your house with all of these things.
Yeah,
like,
and which doors you have, like, the sofa pushed up against, and, like, all the entryways that don't have, like, an alarm set on them, or, like, they're showing the alarm pad, and it's like, okay, well, I'm sure someone smart enough could figure out what your code is.
Yeah, there's some racial implications of those as well.
Oh, big surprise.
Yeah. And I'm just like...
This is my totally surprised voice and face, Beth. I'm shocked.
I just can't. I can't.
Nobody wants your 52 Stanley Cups, Megan. Get over yourself.
God. There's also a whole TikTok thing about... I'm not on TikTok, but I do see these trends about the
someone who is definitely on TikTok.
I see the trends of like, hey, these have lead in them too. I'm like, oh no.
Yep.
I'm like, I can't afford that. I'm so glad.
I'm still using my very dented hydro flask from several years ago. Anyway,
back to
in
murder.
July of 1955, we got to jump back a little bit. 3 months after Dr. Kirk published his report about these findings, a swimmer who lived next to the Sheppard house.
So I'm guessing not the football player, probably the other neighbor.
Well, and I don't know if they lived there while the Sheppards lived there, but yes. And I don't think he lived next door, the football player. I don't think he lived next door to them. I think he just like lived nearby and knew them and saw that there was some hubbub shenanigans going on at the house and went to check it out. And so the swimmer lived next to them and, next to their house, and they were swimming in Lake Erie. So they had the same access path to the beach as the Sheppards, and they found a dented flashlight in the shallow water.
That's so lucky.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess if you're swimming in the same month.
If it's a heavy flashlight.
And that's what I'm assuming it's like one of those mag light, like heavy duty flashlights.
Well, and it was a year later.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of rocks on the shores, like in the shallows of Lake Erie, so it could have been
just chilling,
wedged somewhere. Yeah.
So, yeah, while this is happening, and while they're like pushing to get there's several attempts to push for a retrial, and it just keeps getting denied.
All of his appeals get denied.
The editor of the Cleveland Press writes literally an autobiography detailing how it was him that helped put away Sam Sheppard. I'm like, I hate that there are people just capitalizing on this.
Yup.
So I'm like, well, that's pretty messed up. Yeah, so his attorney spends 6 years making these appeals, and they all are rejected. July 30th, 1961, William Corrigan, his attorney, dies. And this is when F. Lee Bailey takes over as Sheppard's chief of counsel.
Which, talking about people taking advantage of shit, F. Lee Bailey, I don't care how good or bad of a lawyer he is. He's this young hotshot dude.
Right.
He sees this high-profile fucking case, and he's like, that's it. That's my path to stardom.
That's money, right?
That's how I get my name out there.
Right.
I got you. I'm going to be your new lawyer. I was like, wow.
Their motion's denied. Over the next 9 years, they continue to make appeals and petitions, and they're still denied. But finally, on July 15th, 1964, the U.S. District Court of the Southern District of Ohio ruled that Sheppard was denied a fair trial based on 5 separate violations of his constitutional right to due process. So 1, the failure to grant a change of venue or countenance in view of the newspaper publicity before the trial. 2, the inability of maintaining impartial jurors because of the publicity during the trial. 3, failure of the trial judge to disqualify himself, although there was uncertainty as to his impartiality. 4,
he straight up told that woman
guilty as hell.
Oh, he's guilty as hell.
4, improper introduction of the lie detector testimony. And 5, unauthorization communications to the jury during their deliberations. They didn't sequester the jury, and the jury was allowed to make phone calls to their friends and family,
and probably be like, all right, what are they saying on TV about me? Did they put a good picture of me in the newspaper when they printed my name?
What a sham! What a sham!
Yeah, it was straight up like a show trial. It was a bullshit trial.
The court stated that in light of these errors, each of which on its own would be sufficient to reach the decision that a fair trial had not been granted, the trial could only be viewed as a mockery of justice, which I like saying, obviously. So, in this ruling, Judge Carl A. Weinman granted Sheppard's petition for a writ of habeas corpus and declared that since Sheppard's conviction had been unconstitutionally obtained, it was now void. Judge Wyman gave the state of Ohio or Cuyahoga County 60 days in which to hold a new trial and ordered Sheppard's immediate release on a $10,000 bond, which I'm sure is like $50,000 today. Maybe $100,000. The next day, July 16th, 1964, Sheppard was released from prison. So literally 10 years from the murder, like almost to the day, he was released from prison. That's so sad. Just a third of at this point you're 40.
Yeah.
So a quarter of your life has just been spent behind maximum security behind bars.
Yeah.
That's
with everybody assuming that like probably actually the worst thing that ever happened in your life, because his brother said nothing bad ever happened to him. So you spent a quarter of your life in prison with everyone assuming the worst thing that ever happened to you was your fault.
A week after his release, Sheppard appeared in front of a three-judge panel from the U.S. Court of Appeals in Akron, who decided to allow Sheppard to remain free on bail while awaiting the state's appeal of Judge Wyman's decision. A few months later, on October 8th, Sheppard again faced a three-judge panel, this time in the Sixth Circuit Federal Court of Appeals in Cincinnati. The hearing lasted 2 hours, but the decision did not come until May 5th, 1965, at which point the panel ruled to overturn Judge Wyman's granting of the writ of habeas corpus and ordered that Sheppard be returned to prison within 20 days unless he could obtain a I can't today. I'm done.
Where is it?
Continuance. Jesus, Beth.
You put the emphasis on the wrong syllable.
I did. And my brain's like, that's not right.
Yeah,
that's not right.
Okay.
This poor guy.
Where are we at in the timeline now? What year and what month is this?
May 5th, 1965.
Okay. May 5th, 1965.
So he was allowed to be out of jail, and then they're like, just kidding. We're not counting that judge's writ of habeas corpus. You're going to go back to jail. You got to have another trial. So the U.S. Supreme Court announced in November 1965 that it would hear Sheppard's appeal. Upon review, the court reversed the judgment, concluding that Sheppard did not receive a fair trial consistent with the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment. So this was the Supreme Court case of, it was like Sheppard versus Maxwell. Hold on, I had it pulled up and yes, Sheppard versus Maxwell, and they say for this, it examined a defendant's right to a fair trial as required by the 6th Amendment and the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment. So, as I said, because this went all the way to the Supreme Court, it had national repercussions because... So his wife is brutally murdered. He is accused of murdering her. He goes to jail for like 10 years. He gets out only to have a court be like, no, you're going back. They're like, hey, we made a mistake. No, we didn't. Yes, we did. No, we didn't. And then it finally gets to the Supreme Court and they go, yeah, you fucked up. Yes, that's essentially. Justice Clark delivered the opinion of the court. He said this federal habeas corpus application involves the question whether Sheppard was deprived of a fair trial in his state conviction for the second-degree murder of his wife because of the trial judge's failure to protect Sheppard sufficiently from the massive, pervasive, and prejudicial publicity that attended his persecution. We have concluded that Sheppard did not receive a fair trial consistent with the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment and therefore reverse the judgment. So he doesn't even, unfortunately, he's not even getting a clean slate because while they reversed it, they're not absolving him essentially. They're like, no, you're getting off on this case because you weren't granted a fair trial.
Right, but we're gonna screw you this time and send you to jail where you belong, scumbag.
The court remanded the case to the district court. So then he does get a retrial. Mm-hmm. So moving to October 24th, 1966, Judge Francis Talty ordered all photographers and cameramen to stay outside the building, and he barred reporters from obtaining any information about the trial other than what happened in court. F. Lee Bailey, Sheppard's defense counsel, presented a detailed and diagrammed description of how the murderer had swung the weapon with his left hand and described the large black blood spot on the closet door that had been left by someone other than the Sheppards. Also testifying on Sheppard's behalf was Dr. Richard Koch, who testified that 2 of Sheppard's teeth had been broken. See, this is what I was telling you about. And his mouth badly cut, damage that he said Sheppard could not have inflicted upon himself. An osteopathic doctor also testified that he had found a fracture in Sheppard's vertebrae and a bruise on his spinal cord when he examined him 2 days after the murder, which was also damage Sheppard could not have inflicted upon himself.
The thing that we also have not put out there yet is that by this point in time, not only is like the media circus returning because of the notoriety of this case, but since 1963, there has been a TV show called The Fugitive.
This is wild that this happened.
And it can't. The story of is he a doctor in the show too? So the series premise was set up as the main character has been on the run for 6 months, having exhausted all of his appeals against his death sentence. And he is like the titular fugitive trying to clear his name. So yes, he's a doctor, Richard Kimball, on death row. He's been tried and convicted for the murder of his wife, and he's innocent, proved guilty. What Richard Kimball could not prove was that moments before discovering his wife's body, he encountered a man running from the vicinity of his home, a man with one arm, a man who has not yet been found. Richard Kimball ponders his fate as he looks at the world for the last time and sees only darkness. So there's this TV show that is wildly popular. Like, it is literally, the finale of this TV show was the highest rated television show in history, and it kept that title until the 1980s when it was unseated by Dallas.
Good God.
So like everyone in the country is watching this show, which they all think is based on this Sam Sheppard trial. The creator of the show was like, no, it's not. But bullshit.
Come on.
I call bullshit. And yes, if you're thinking, wait a minute, The Fugitive, wasn't that a movie with Harrison Ford? You're fucking right, it was. Same premise, same idea. For sure, fucking loosely based on this case. All right. Now you know. It's wild. It's the wild fucking West here at the courthouse.
As the kids say, BFFR. Be fucking for real.
Prefer. Wow. Excellent timing, Dryer.
So yeah, the jury began deliberations on November 16th, 1966, and then returned a verdict of not guilty on the same day. So they obviously looked at the evidence and was like, oh, yeah, like, obviously he's not guilty.
They also questioned some other people in this case. Like, F. Lee Bailey was like, no, we're not doing the whole, like, sex route. Like, we're not calling Susan back. Like, leave her alone.
I don't know
She's
why.
in California.
Like, we're not doing the sex route.
We're not doing that shit. Like, we're not going to talk about it.
It's also unprecedented. He did not have Sam take the stand.
No.
People have said that was kind of a gamble, but I think he also was like, look, we all know how this went the last time.
Right. And I think that's because he like really studied the trial transcripts of the first trial and was like, I'm not making the same mistakes that the old defense made. He had Kirk testify about the blood spatter and ask like very specific questions about like, well, yes, he had blood on his watch, but how did it get there? And Kirk was like, oh, well, it's like a transfer. Like, he bumped against something. And they're like, well, previously didn't it say that it was like the blood was like flying off? And he's like, well, yeah, but normally there's like a tail end on this and that doesn't have it. So he like, he asked all the right questions and took the route that he should have because he did his homework. Like, he studied the shit out of that original trial.
It just makes me sad because I'm like, this all was evidence that was there that there was no access to it. Like the cards were stacked against like Sam Sheppard.
Yes. And he made a point of pointing out just how fucked up like that initial investigation was, because he was like, well, didn't you see all these other blood spatters that were like going down the stairs? And like the initial detectives and people investigating were like, well, no, I didn't even look there.
I was walking through the house and I let like the jurors walk through the house, but no, I didn't.
There was a
that.
Cleveland Browns player here. I was talking to him about the football season. How was I supposed to know I was supposed to be looking for blood on the floor?
Why?
What do you think? That's my job?
Yeah,
oh,
you think I don't need to do my job.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine. Like, yeah, like they had to interview, like they didn't have him there. I do love that Bailey did cross-examine Gerber, the coroner.
Yes.
And he about the medical instrument and was like, I looked all over the place across the entire United States for this, and I did not find this medical instrument you're talking about. So, like, explain yourself.
Yeah.
God, what a good, like, it feels like just potatoes.
He also did what you're supposed to do, because you don't have to prove necessarily that by fact and point he didn't do it.
Right,
you just have to provide reasonable doubt. And so Bailey thought the best way to do this is be like, hey, isn't it at least plausible that there is another killer that could be here, even if we don't know who he is? And so he went down this route of Esther Hook. Did you see any of this? Houk? Hook.
Oh,
there was speculation that Marilyn may have had an affair or some kind of like relation with Esther's husband, but there was no actual proof. And so he was like, well, could it not be possible that this woman was so angry that she thought Marilyn had an affair with her husband that she did this to her? Like, he just needed to provide the possibility that anyone but Sam could have done this.
Let me plant a seed for you.
Yes. And he was like, isn't it possible that like that her husband Spencer helped do this to like sort of like, you know, all right, fine, we'll kill her to get like rid of this whole situation so you can get off my nuts about it or whatever. And he had like somebody come in to testify about like, well, I did see a guy there having coffee with her one time. So I guess like it's possible. And Esther was like, well, I did start a fire in my fireplace that morning, even though it was like 69 degrees outside, because he wanted the jury to think like, oh, well, she was burning evidence.
That's where Sam's shirt went.
The t-shirt.
I'll be honest. So we don't ever find out where his t-shirt went. I assume whoever the assailant was. There's
some speculation with one of the people, like the main suspect that we will get to. There is some speculation of what happened with him in regards to that kind of makes sense. So we'll get there.
Poor Sam. He's just like, I don't know.
God, he literally said, I don't know. I think I saw something where like when he was on trial, he said, I don't know, like over 150 times.
Oh God.
Yeah.
But that's always like you're taught like in like retail and like customer service. You don't tell people I don't know because they don't believe you. You have to give them like some sort of answer.
We were not, when I worked at Disney, that's part of the customer service training there, is that you are not allowed to say I don't know. You have to provide them with some kind of answer, or you have to provide them with a pathway to getting the answer. So like if someone asks you something, you're like, okay, I don't have that information, but come with me over here to this person that might, and I will have them try to help you figure it out.
I know, we do that all the time.
Yeah, that's our job.
So,
but yeah, also, as Beth said, Bailey was like, hey, you're really off-putting. I'm not putting you on the stand. We need the jury to like you. And I've seen an interview with Sam on like the courthouse steps, and I think it's when he's with F. Lee Bailey, and somebody asks him like, what did it cost you, like, and they're asking like money wise, like what did this like retrial cost you, and he's just like, rightfully so, pissed, and his response was something along the lines of like, what did it cost me? My mother's life. How much does it cost to bring her back? How much does it cost to bring my father back? Like, I don't care about the money.
Right. I spent 10 years in prison. I've just literally spent a fourth of my life behind bars.
Yeah. But then, of course, everyone was like, well, you didn't mention Marilyn, so you clearly did it.
God. So his closing argument was Bailey told that the jurors that this is such a good closing argument. It's very convincing. I think I would have sat there like, yeah, you're right. He said, the real killer is not in the courtroom. Someone was angry enough to kill. Someone who didn't have the strength in her arm that Sam Sheppard had. For indeed, he would have crushed that skull like an eggshell. Despite his earlier hints about the possible motive, Bailey said the case still left many questions unanswered. Why was that person still angry? What had happened? What had Marilyn done to anger that person? We will never really know. Like, okay. I would have been like, yeah. The first vote was 8-4 for acquittal, but then they came around and like he was found not guilty. Mm-hmm. However, so damage is done at that point.
Yeah, he's free, but as we've really pounded into you here, a quarter of his life has been spent behind bars. His family is ruined. His reputation is tarnished. His relationship with his son is strained. He's only seen his son over the last 10 years on visits in a prison that were not conducive to having like a good relationship or visits with him. His son is clearly struggling with all of this as well. Like, I feel so bad for him.
Right.
He's now free. He tries to go back to practicing medicine, but this is 10 years away from... The reason that it is called a practice is because you use practical skills in this job. So he has not been doing any of this for 10 years.
Right. And he does get his medical license back. The Board of Ohio the next year gives his medical license returned.
But he's also self-medicating at this point. He's drinking a lot.
He's drinking a ton.
His brother Steven in that True CSI episode that I watched said that like he came to visit Steven and his wife and was so frustrated with everything and was so drunk that he punched a hole in their wall, and he was like, all right, good to see you, get out. Like,
good Lord.
He clearly like was really struggling with this and was drinking too much. And then
he also,
while he was practicing medicine again, 2 of his patients died.
Yes, in 2 of the surgeries he did, he technically botched them. Like, he nicked an artery in one patient who was like 29 years old, like too young to have died. And then he didn't nick something, but he like didn't do the surgery correctly, and that patient died like the next day. So, and he was working out of Youngstown, so he was working trying to work pretty far away from Bay Village.
Yeah. He was also taking uppers to wake up in the morning after his benders, and then he was taking downers to go to sleep at night.
Right.
So he's now abusing pills and alcohol.
And he also, he's still a younger man, and he's like a good-looking dude still.
Are we gonna talk about Ariane?
Yes, he gets married again. Oh, wait, before we begin, after the trial, he also appeared on The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson on December 7th, which I am like, Johnny Carson, that's pretty wild that you're having, like, I get he made national news, but I'm also, and I get like The Fugitive and all the, like, the implications of that, but I'm just like,
also, I think it's more so, like, it's national news. There's The Fugitive, which is the most popular TV show, but also, you were found guilty, and now you have been found not guilty of this heinous crime. Like, yeah, that's hot news.
Right. And after his acquittal, he did have a book written called Endure and Conquer with a ghostwriter, but his ghostwriter didn't like writing it with him because he was like, no, I still think he's guilty. Like, I don't want to write this book.
Why would you take that job then?
I don't know.
Capitalism.
So, yes, we are going to talk about... So, he does get married again. He starts seeing this woman while he's in prison, I believe.
I don't know if it's Ariane or Ariane, but Teben Johan is a crazy last name.
Yes. And so it comes out after his trial, because he's still hot news, that Ariane is related, her half sister.
Tangentially.
Yes.
Like, she's not related, but she is connected to.
Her half sister is the wife of I'm gonna mess up his name.
Goebbels. Joseph Goebbels.
Joseph Goebbels, which, if you guys are
Goebbels and Goering.
if you're like World War II history people, you know that he is a Nazi, and he was in charge of like Nazi propaganda in World War II. So not the look you want to go for, Sam Sheppard, after being acquitted of murder.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much info he had, because their relationship started with her writing letters to him in prison from Germany, and then she came to the U.S. to visit him in prison. So I don't know that I would have led with like a letter of like, hi, hello, Dr. Sam. I have been following your case on the television here in Germany, and I think you are so handsome, and I do not think you murdered your wife. I feel so sad for you. I would like to come visit you, if that is okay with you at all. Also, fun fact about me, my sister is married to a Nazi war criminal, so fun for us. Okay, we'll talk to you soon. Getting on the plane now. Bye-bye.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Okay, so he did nick multiple things for those surgeries. He was doing a disectomy on a woman and accidentally cut an artery. This was 5 days after he was granted privileges of his like medical practice, and then after that, on August 6th, he nicked the right iliac artery on a 29-year-old patient. So he did resign from the hospital because he was being sued for wrongful death.
I think he did eventually get disbarred again from practicing, though.
But yeah, so he was with Ariane. That came to light. They eventually divorced. And then he moved. And he moved to Ghana. Ohio, right? Ghana? G-A-H? Gahana?
Gehenna? Lady in the land, we need you.
Yeah. So he moved there, which is completely different than, like, it's very quiet, very, like, suburban. And he is just, they, like, don't bother him there because, like, they're like, he's paid his dues. And he meets Colleen, who, like, he started a medical practice there, but he was like, I'll take anybody. And the people he was taking were, like, a lot of them were just curious, like, women who were like, oh, Dr. Sam. And then he was like, I'll go anywhere. 3 a.m., you need a house call, I'm your man.
I'll be up. I've taken a shitload of pills.
So he's like going to these different places. He's not making money. He's making maybe $350 a month for being a doctor. And he meets Colleen, who is a hairdresser, and they essentially, like, she's very young. Her name's Colleen Strickland, and she's like a hairdresser. She's like 18. Like, she's very young compared to him. And she straight up said, like, I felt kind of sorry for him. So they, like, fall in kind of together. He at first is, like, living with friends that he, like, befriends. And then they get married. And while they are, like, married, he meets her dad, who's in professional wrestling. And he kind of looks at him and he's like, I could do that. And how do they describe him? They call him body beautiful. Which I'm like, does that just mean he's, like, inclined to be, like, already kind of athletically fit? Because that's the vibe I'm getting. So, like, Sam cleans up his act for, like, a little bit. He, like, starts doing calisthenics and he's running all the time. He's lifting weights. And he gets trained by the dad, George Strickland, to become this wrestler. And they call him Sam the Killer Sheppard. And so he's fighting matches. So this is my favorite part of the wrestling connection.
His, finisher.
So he comes up because he knows a lot. He's a doctor. He knows a lot about like the body. He comes out with this finisher called what we call today the Mandible Claw. So it was first called the mandibular nerve pinch. So Sam Sheppard created that. I actually printed out the technique so we could. So the idea is that the aggressor places his middle and ring fingers in his opponent's mouth, sliding them under the tongue, and grabbing the soft tissue found at the bottom of the mouth. The thumb and or palm of the same hand is then placed under the jaw, and pressure is applied downward by the middle and ring fingers, while the thumb and palm forces the jaw upwards. So this was like used, and he's the one who invented it, so it had kind of a stereotype to it, or, you know, people know what this move is today in wrestling because back in the 90s, Mick Foley, aka Mankind, used this. This was his finisher. It has since then been used by Bray Wyatt, who, rest in peace, very sad that he passed away. He used it as the Fiend, and he actually like borrowed it from Mankind, but Mankind used it like added insult to injury with this move because he literally took a sock out from his like pants, put it on his arm, and so you've got this crotch sock in your mouth, like with a little face on it, Mr. Sacco.
A dirty crotch sock in your mouth while someone is essentially just gripping your jaw and like has control over your head with that.
So
as someone with TMJ, you were like Mandible, and I started pressing like my thumb into my tendon, like, okay, where are we going?
So Foley later claimed on a television interview that the painful sensation in the nerves under the tongue is so strong that it inhibits vision, and when applied long enough, it can force the opponent to black out. I believe it. Like, I think especially like when you're a wrestler, it's not like you have little dainty tiny hands. Like, especially the guys that are doing it, they're big guys. Like, and Sam Sheppard was pretty muscular when he was doing this, so I believe it. I believe that this doesn't feel good. With such intimate contact with the inside of the opponent's mouth, it would not be likely that this could end up being it would not be unlikely that this is somewhat unhygienic.
Like you're slapping on each other's sweaty, gross bodies. You're like grabbing under each other's legs and crotches, and then he sticks his fingers in your mouth.
So he initially wore 2-fingered gloves or sheaths over his middle and ring fingers, which is better, but you're still sweating into the gloves.
That also just feels very like curly from Of Mice and Men. Like, I wear this glove to keep it soft for my woman.
And then eventually he had Mr. Sacco, which made it one of like that move that's why everybody's like, oh, I know that move because of Mr. Sacco. So it's said that Jim Cornette first taught the move to Mick Foley. That actually makes sense to me because Jim Cornette is known to be like a huge wrestling history buff. Like, he's got boxes and boxes and boxes of old like wrestling memorabilia and stuff. So I'm like, it makes sense that he would know that. But they so at first when it was suggested, one of his bosses, Bill Watts, was like, that's a terrible idea. Like, why don't I just bite your goddamn fingers off? I don't want to say this guy's name right now because like bad juju in the news, but like Vince McMahon heard about it and was like, bleh.
True scumbag.
And Mick Foley essentially like persuaded McMahon and said like, no, it literally like it's a nerve hold, like it's going to immobilize you because you're in pain, which I really feel like if you have beefy fingers in your mouth and they're pushing down under your tongue, like that's not gonna feel good, like it's gonna hurt. So because it's under, and because these fingers are under your tongue, like the opponent would have to bite through their tongue to bite somebody's fingers. So like obviously that's not gonna work.
Good luck, because I have a tiny mouth. Your fingers wouldn't even fit in there.
So Sam Sheppard, like I said, he invented this, But he also knew, like, he had an idea that he was dying. He knew he was heavily drinking. They said he was drinking up to 1.5 liters of alcohol a day, which...
Yeah. His brother said a quart of vodka a day at least.
That's so much. And he had told Colleen, his wife, he told her, like, I'm pretty sure I'm gonna be dead. Like, a month before, like, it was like 6 months ahead. He's like, yeah, I won't make it to like the end of the year. I think I'm gonna die. And then like a month before he died, he was like, I'm pretty sure I'm dying. So he like took time off, and hit George Strickland, who like trained him, was also like his tag team partner. He just assumed that like Sam was taking a step back because, like, you know, Sam's not in wrestling business. Sam's not like a spring chicken.
No,
Like he's
46.
Yeah, he's like middle age. Like that's most wrestlers retire by then.
Yeah. This is like, you know how we all watch like The Undertaker come out and it takes him 25 minutes to even get to the ring, and then like the wrestling match itself is like
2 minutes.
Yeah, and we're like, oh my god, this is the longest 2 minutes ever. It's like that age.
So he takes a step back. He doesn't jog anymore. He's self-medicating heavily. His last like weekend alive, Colleen thought he had the flu, and she like didn't go near him because she didn't want to catch his flu.
That's sad.
So like she like let they had pet cats that he like an ocelot cat, and
they're pretty.
Like he was happy to see the ocelot, and they
That's like also not a domesticated
no.
cat.
I'm like, well, it was the 60s, right?
Yeah, everybody had like chimpanzees and shit in their house.
So yeah, they had a cat and stuff like that, and he like played with the kitten, and she thought he was taking a turn for the better. But then he literally got up in like the middle of the night and like fell into the kitchen, and that's where she like woke up and found him, was like in the kitchen. He's bleeding from his mouth.
Yeah, I saw that he like vomited blood.
He vomited blood, and they called to get like help for him, but by the time like help came, he was gone. Like he had died. And he had told Colleen, like, because he had told her all along, like, do not try to assess it, like, let me go. Like, I am ready. So I'm not saying that like I'm not saying that it was like suicide, but I am saying that like he knew that like what he was doing was not, he knew he was killing himself.
He was not taking any preventative measures to slow it down or anything like that. He just kept on same old, same old.
And so yeah, like Colleen was upset that they didn't try to save him, but there was really nothing they could do. And the official thing said like cirrhosis of the liver, that it was like liver failure that he died from, but he really was dying from complications of pills and alcohol abuse.
Yeah. Well, that is, you know, you see that a lot in people who have substance abuse issues and addiction, is it causes like cirrhosis of the liver. Like your liver is the thing that's like helping your kidneys get rid of all the toxins and shit in your body. So like when you keep putting toxins in your body, it's gonna take a toll on it. So yeah, that's a rough way to go.
It is a very rough way to go. So he had like no real money to his name. He had like $5,000 of assets. That was about it. And, you know, when people asked, like, do you feel like you were, like, too young for him? Do you feel like, did you miss him? And she's like, I felt sorry for him. Like, he was like a kicked puppy dog when I met him. And I'm like, that's so, and she's like, he was very youthful for being, like, middle-aged, essentially. And that, like, he lost, like, you know, he essentially lost part of his youth because he spent a part of his
He spent like his 30s.
He spent his 30s in jail. So, yeah, like, so she had to call her dad, who was in Nashville, and he heard it like on the like radio that someone who was spent 10 years in prison and now has a wrestling coach. He's like, that sounds like Sam. I can't imagine. So, yeah, like that's how they found out, and they had like his funeral. But they said for his funeral that he like was they said he was like pretty well, like it was a pretty well attended funeral. And it is funny because they also say, like, upon interviewing Colleen later in life, they're like, she's like, he didn't drink that heavily. Like, he hardly drank at all. And I'm like, ma'am, like, they...
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's just, like, you don't want people to think ill of somebody that you cared about, so you're just trying to, like, mediate that perception.
But they said that there was a lot of reporters. We didn't let them inside after the eulogy started. Their few Hell Angels were there. Well, she said maybe not Hell's Angels, but motorcycle club members, the Road Saints. They were patients of Sam, and these people worshipped him. He never pressured them to pay.
Aww.
So this was part of his, like, practice. And the motorcyclist came at the end of the line. They followed the procession. And he had a very long procession. Lights after lights after lights were held up, you know, so all the people could go through. So she said his gravesite was flanked by 2 plots purchased by George and Betty Strickland. And it was a cold day, and there was only about 8 or... So this lady, Vivian Ryan, who was an executive of the cemetery, said there was only about 8 or 9 cars, and of course all those motorcycle hippies. The burial service was quiet and dignified. Everybody was very composed, except for those motorcycle hippies who were riding their bikes all over the cemetery on the great... Oh my god, I can't. Trying to find a place to park. So his marker reads Dr. Samuel H. Sheppard, 1929 to 1970. On the letters inscribed on one side are the letters VQP, and they stand for Vincent Qui Patur, which is he who endures conquers, which is one of his mottos, which makes sense because that's what his book was called.
Yeah.
So yeah, Sam died being haunted by the guilt of the trial and everything that not the guilt of killing his wife, but I would say kind of being haunted by the trial and everything that happened consequently after the murder of his wife.
That is still not the end of this story,
No.
though, listeners.
No.
Surprisingly. So that's 1970. In 1990, Sam Jr. sort of made a push to, like, reopen this case. He was trying to get people to investigate it so that he could finally get some, you know, closure and peace about who killed his mother, which then indirectly, you know, ruined his father's life. And he was not handling this well. He said himself that, like, the stress of this and the trauma of this, like, he said he never cried for his mother until 1990. And he calls it, in his words, he had a nervous breakdown. And he was like, that was the end result of, like, all that repressed trauma and feelings and, like, not having any sense of, like, justice or closure with this.
Right.
He came to a event in Bay Village in 1990 in October.
Oh no.
To bring up this and to sort of petition local people to join him in this quest to reopen his mother's case. Unfortunately, the day after this event that he spoke at, Bay Village was in the news once again, national headlines, due to the abduction and disappearance of Amy Mihalovic. So this sort of overshadowed
overshadowed
Sam Jr.'s attempts to reopen this case. So it would take until 1997 for them to actually go to court again. He filed a civil suit against Cuyahoga County on behalf of his father for wrongful imprisonment. Both the bodies of Marilyn and Sam were exhumed at this point for DNA to be tested with forensic analysis against, like, those blood spatters that they found.
Mm-hmm.
In 2000, an 8-week trial was opened. It was a civil jury considered the evidence of Sam's guilt. His legal team argued that there was someone who could actually have killed Marilyn and presented the evidence that it could have been this other person. So this man had been brought up previously in regards to these trials. This wasn't like newly found information.
Right.
But they always sort of pushed him off because it was not a compelling theory at the time and it wasn't fitting the narrative that they wanted for these cases.
Well, of course.
Right. So in 1989, so we're going to back up a minute. So a year before Sam Jr. is trying to reopen this case due to this evidence, in 1989, a man named Richard Eberling had been convicted of murdering an elderly woman that he had befriended. And while he was in prison for this murder, a reporter started interviewing him, this reporter from like New York City who grew up in the area and knew of the Sam Sheppard case. She started writing to him, calling him, going to visit him and talk to him. And through these conversations that she had with him, she found out that Richard Eberling had been doing like handiwork around Bay Village and had done some work for Marilyn Sheppard prior to her murder. And I'm not talking about like a long time before her murder, like fairly recent to her murder. He was known for being sort of an odd man. He had very like obsessive tendencies about people, and he had sort of focused that attention on Marilyn. He had grown up in the foster care system. Both of his parents were gone. His father had actually been poisoned.
Oh, God.
And while now knowing what we know, you could speculate that it was Richard, but there was no actual evidence and no accusation that he killed his father. And so he longed to be part of like a family unit. He would like steal these little tchotchke figures and had like them in his house in these little family clusters. And he really fixated on Marilyn because she was sort of that like ideal mother. Like she had this like happy marriage. She had this son.
And she's beautiful.
She's beautiful. But then there's also that dichotomy of she is like the ideal mother situation, but he also finds her sexually attractive.
Right.
So now we have a new theory here as to what happened to Marilyn. He had done some work in the house before, so he knew all of the doors and windows and entryways. He would know that they don't lock their doors.
Right.
He would know exactly where the bedrooms were. And this new theory is that he drives to Huntington Beach Park, which is just a few blocks away from the Sheppard home.
Right.
Parks his car there, goes down to the beach, crawls along the sand so that no one sees him, goes up the steps behind the house, and lets himself in.
Fair enough.
He goes upstairs to Marilyn's room.
Okay.
And is there to, like, confess his love to her. Because at this point in his mind, like, she has reciprocated those feelings. Because this is, like, wishful thinking.
Right. He states that, like, Sam just kind of ignored him and was like a prick, but like Marilyn, my God, what a woman, paid respectful attention to him, so that was his in, right?
Yeah. This new theory is that then he is there to confess his love to her. He expects her to reciprocate it. He wants her to, like, all right, we're going to be together. You're going to come away with me. And when she does not return that attention immediately, then this moves into the realm of sexual assault and rape. And in the rage of her biting him, fighting him off, he then beats her to death. And he had stated to this reporter in previous conversations, and remember, he's already been he's been convicted of murdering another woman.
Right.
Brutally murdering another woman. Like, she was found in a very similar fashion to Marilyn. Like, her clothes were pulled up to expose her chest. Her pants were pulled down. Her bed was a mess. He beat her face in. So this is, like, very similar situation. He confessed to that reporter who was talking to him that he liked watching people die. So she's like, yeah, it makes absolute sense to me that he could beat her 35 times so brutally. And then he also was balding, but because he was balding, he liked to wear toupees, which would explain the weird bushy hair that Sam said he saw. And so he could have been wearing this bushy haired toupee. He attacks Sam. He runs away.
Right.
Sam comes after him. They're on the beach. And so they have speculated that he grabbed Sam by the shirt to drag him into the water.
Oh.
And then either ripped the shirt while fighting with him and then took it to clean the blood off himself, or just did that, took the shirt to clean himself off after he knocked Sam unconscious again, chucks the flashlight or whatever he beat her with into the water, and takes off.
Sounds compelling to me.
Yes.
We also had James Neff, author of The Wrong Man, also spent hours interviewing Eberling in hopes of gaining a confession. Ultimately, he didn't get a full confession, but he got very close remarks to admissions of guilt. Eberling said he fully expected to be convicted of murdering Marilyn back in 1954. He complained that Sam Sheppard, who he called a prick, ignored him. But most tellingly, Neff contends Eberling, in an interview conducted shortly before his death in prison in 1998, described himself finding himself in the bloody bedroom of Marilyn Sheppard. My God, I have never seen anything like it. I got it. I got out of there. Unfortunately, though, even with this like very compelling evidence, they took a DNA test for Richard Eberling, but it was inconclusive.
Right. And so again, remember, this is a civil suit against Ohio. It's against Cuyahoga County. And their main guy basically argued, his continued argument is, you cannot go off of what you're testing on DNA now after it is A, this old, B, has been like improperly handled and stored all this time. And he kept saying improperly handled and stored, but they had been keeping like the DNA evidence. They kept like the swabs from her autopsy in a safe, and like really the best place to keep DNA is in a dark, dry place.
Whose fault is that too?
Yeah.
Like,
and so he just kept saying like, you can't even try this information because it hasn't been properly stored and it could have degraded. Like, you can't go off of those. And I'm like, okay, I understand your argument, but also that just feels like kind of, it's not a straw man fallacy, but it kind of feels like one. Like, I could be like, I have this photograph that shows Beth murdering a man, but it's from 1991. And he'd be like, well, you didn't store that photograph properly, and it's degraded, and the color's changing, and it's warped, and it is like so I cannot be 100% sure that that's Beth in that photograph. And you didn't keep it in, like, you kept it in one of those weird old photo albums with the sticky paper where the glue starts breaking down the photo and ruins it.
oh my God.
So we can't go off of that.
That's so funny. I would have been so young in 1990.
I was going to say 1982, and I'm like, Beth wasn't even alive.
They also, the defense tried to say that they didn't do the blood technique and typing correctly back in the 50s, and that the blood collected from that closet spot was type O rather than Eberling's blood type was A. I mean, but they clearly also wasn't Sam or Marilyn, so like, who's right in this situation?
Right. They also, in that 2000 trial, introduced the idea of a new murder weapon. They said that there had been a lamp on the table between their beds, and then they were like, well, we couldn't find that lamp in the house. Like, it didn't exist anywhere. Which then the other side was like, but doesn't it make more sense that it was the flashlight that was like found in Lake Erie? And like, if you were sneaking along the beach to go in someone's house, would you not bring a flashlight with you to guide your way?
Right.
Like, it makes more sense that he would have that with him.
Right.
But again, they were like, inconclusive. The jury ended up siding with the county on this one.
Which is wild.
Yeah,
to me.
6 of the 8 jurors said in interviews that they were convinced that Sam did it. And sadly, like, it's probably not gonna ever be opened again.
No.
Unless Project Porchlight or something gets on this and really helps fund like some more DNA evidence or something like that. I mean, I don't know that it's ever gonna have a conclusive answer here.
No, I would agree. And the sad thing is too is like this court case and this murder trial and just the murder of, like, it's been used so much in popular culture that you would think there would be more kind of like deliberation, but I think people just love the idea of like a good murder story. Obviously we got all these true crime podcasts going around, but like it's been used, like, God, there's literally a Wikipedia page of like popular culture used, and like The Fugitive, television stuff. There's Cold Case Law and Order. There was literally a Law and Order episode called Justice based on Sam Sheppard's mission to clear his father's name. Just so many different things have been done on this where they're like capitalizing on kind of this court trial and this murder, and like this poor Chip or Sam Sheppard, like,
yeah,
Junior.
Sam Reese.
Yeah.
I don't think he's actually a junior, but I just keep calling him that to differentiate them. But I just feel so bad for him. Like he
lost all of his family.
He lost his whole family, and then just like continuously fought to clear like his dad's name, to find his mom's killer, and just keeps getting pushed aside every time.
Right. And like that's unfortunately, like, when you say the name Sam Sheppard, as I said, like there's literally books that have come out that are like, no, he's very innocent. Look at all this very compelling DNA evidence and then there's other books who are like, those books are wrong. Like he's guilty. Like equal amounts in both. Like people truly feel that he did it. Like there's just like and this crime, you know, it's now it's so old that like that's how it's going to be remembered in Ohio history, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I also think that it's like a little bit like what we've talked about before with like Shaker Heights and Lisa Pruitt, where it's like, well, I grew up here and I have always heard this, and that is what everyone I know thinks, so that is what I think, and you can't change my mind.
Right. And yeah, obviously, I think we both feel kind of the same way that, like, I don't think he did it.
I don't either. Growing up, though, like, I remember, I mean, my mom was always just like, anytime you say something about Sam Sheppard, she's like, oh, that brain surgeon. Like, I mean, she was alive during this trial. She was very young. She was born in 48. So, like, she probably would have peripherally heard about this. She for sure would have been, like, paying attention when he went back to his retrial in the 60s. Yeah, I mean, like I said, original information, I would have been like, oh, for sure he did it. And then, like, you present this other theory, this possibility of another killer, and I'm like, okay, I buy it. Like, this Eberling theory really makes sense to me.
Right. The MO is similar. Like, the connection is there. We just didn't have a direct confession. And the
we
DNA...
don't have a direct confession, and we don't have unequivocal evidence, and that's the problem.
The DNA, while it was inconclusive,
it could have been,
yes, they said it was like,
not definitively him.
Yes, it wasn't 100% certainty. They said they were like 90%, and they're like, that's not good enough. So it's just...
You also have to remember, anytime that you have the justice system being called into question, they are going to do everything in their power to not have to admit that they did something wrong. Right.
The odds are stacked against you.
Yes.
So, yeah, it is very unfortunate. It's very tragic, and it's very sad that Marilyn died such a brutal death after, like, a really nice night with her family.
Yes.
And that's the only thing that I'm like, she died, like, hanging out with her family and with her like husband and like holding him and stuff like that, like, you know, and watching him doing something that would just be a very typical like day in the summer. But it's just so sad. Like, it's just so sad. Like, they took away not only Marilyn, but they took away an unborn like kid, like a wanted pregnancy. So yeah, every time we do these true crime episodes, I'm always like, good God, why does our justice system suck so hard?
Don't, Beth, we are at like over an hour into this. Don't get me started. Yeah. I will piss off so many people.
Yep. I feel like there's a lot of stuff that we find out that we're like, but why? Pourquoi?
Yeah.
¿Por qué?
Yeah. I am going to I am gonna go home and I am gonna watch The Fugitive with Harrison Ford in it because it's streaming on Paramount Plus. And I'm gonna watch it and I'm gonna feel vindicated at the end of it because I'm not gonna get that from anything else.
No. So yeah, thank you guys for joining us on this journey of this very long and tragic
an unexpectedly weird dive into wrestling.
Yep. It's my favorite, like, you know, obviously I do a lot of like, for the library, I do a lot of like Ohio based programming and stuff like that. And it's my favorite, like, how can I marry my love of wrestling knowledge and my Ohio knowledge? Thank you, Sam Sheppard.
Nazi propaganda.
And Nazi propaganda. Oh, one trial, one man, one murder.
Wild.
Okay.
I kept looking at like pictures of them during this, and I was like, if they made a movie of it, who would they cast? And like he looks a lot like, there's one actor in particular and I can't think of his name, but like he looks like him in the 90s, so he's too old now. Oh. And then there's other ones where I'm like, oh, Patrick Wilson, but again, too old now.
I love Patrick Wilson though. Yeah, I just watched Insidious with him, and the last Insidious movie they made, and I was like, I'm not saying he can't have like aged facial features, but when did this happen? And I'm like, it's only been like 5 years since the last Insidious, and I'm like, Beth, it's been a decade. It's been a literal decade.
He didn't make that same deal that Paul Rudd has with the devil. Chris Bauer is the guy that in the 90s he looked a lot like him. Like he's like older in this one, but
oh yeah, I see it now. Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, unfortunately, this has to come to an end, and we don't have like a good ending for you for facts. But we are thankful that you went on this journey with us.
The time has come to end the pod. We don't have answers. Oh my God.
We just want you to sit and percolate on what we told you.
It's such a bummer. It's cold, not summer. Everything sucks. I hurt my bod. Well, we want to thank you for listening.
And thank you to our spooky sponsor.
And thank our spooky sponsor, too. I don't know where I'm going or what I'm doing, but thank you.
And yeah, on that note, stay spooky, friends.